Hello, Guitar Smarts fans. Before you check out this podcast, I want to make you aware of a cool new place where you can interact with other Guitar Smarts listeners. It's a Facebook group called the Guitar Geek Hangout. That's where we hang out and talk about all things guitar. So, if you like the Guitar Smarts podcast, come and chat with Kiran and myself over in the Guitar Geek Hangout on Facebook. Maybe check out some pre-podcast clips and even get involved in asking and answering lots of questions from the other page dwellers. Hope to see you there.
I bought the pedal on a whim for £50 delivered. It promptly arrived. Took a couple of weeks. It is one of the best pedals I've ever played in my life. It's absolutely phenomenal. The always-on kind of clean, crunchy tones from it are impeccable. The full-on gain sound from it is impeccable. It is just a monstrous pedal for 50 quid.
Greetings. Welcome to another Guitar Smarts podcast. This week we are carrying on with our discussion about pedal boards. Last week we were talking about what pedals we have, how to set them up and how to order them, how to maybe put them on a board. And this week we're carrying on that discussion and talking about things like switching and power. And yeah, there we go. So if you enjoyed last week's show and this week's show, come and give us a like on our social media pages. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Guitar Smarts and on Instagram as well at guitar_smarts. We really love to hear from our listeners. If you've got questions for us, then please drop us a line on our social media pages and we'd love to answer your questions and mention you on the show. Remember to subscribe and like the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so that you never miss a show. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Let's get to it. Let's actually build a board. So I would say the first thing to consider when you're building the board is you've obviously, as you say, you've got all your pedals. You know how big a board you need because you've laid your pedals out in an order. You've probably done some research. I would say you need to consider whether you want to leave room to expand your collection of pedals without having to take things away. And interestingly, there's some interesting products on the market now that allow you to do that. So obviously, if you're familiar with pedal board technology, there's this company now called Schmidt that make the Schmidt array boards, which allow you, as you mentioned earlier on, to have kind of layers of pedals so that you can kind of lift up the top of your pedal board. You have pedals underneath and then pedals on top, and that allows you to get more into the real estate. But D'Addario just this year have released a pedal board called the Expand, as in XPND. It's just the word expand with the vowels taken. It's genius. But it's a telescopic pedal board, so you can have a normal kind of pedal board, pedal train junior size board, like a couple of feet wide maybe, but you can then extend it out. It will kind of pull out of itself and kind of you can make it longer on one side. So that's quite a good thing to do. But I would say one of the first things to do is just to consider the size of the board that you need and whether you want it to be bigger for future kind of improvements and additions of pedals, or whether you're happy with a particular size for convenience sake. So I have mine on a Pedal Train Classic Junior, but it's only half full and it probably won't ever get full. But that's good enough for me. I think you've got the Pedal Train 2, which is like the size up from that.
Yeah, it's kind of a medium-sized board, I deliberately chose that. After again speaking to you when I was building this board, and you said, well, look, consider, do you want to get the bigger one if you're going to buy lots more pedals and things? And I thought, you know what, I don't want to get so into having such a complex board that then becomes heavier to transport and becomes another source of potential frustration if for whatever reason at a gig during sound check that something's gone down on the board and I'm trying to figure out where the issue is. So I thought, I know the effects that I want to have. Yes, I could get a board big enough to put 7 different distortion pedals on there and have all that variety and option rather than just swapping and changing different pedals out. But I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go middle of the road with it, and I'm very happy with the size of that board. And in fact, like a few other guitarist friends that I've spoken to who are gigging musicians, I'm considering even just building a smaller board as a second board, right, which is just an even simpler setup for jam nights, open mic nights, or just kind of the odd depth gig here and there where I don't need the full wireless setup. I don't need all of the different distortion pedals and gain pedals on there. And again, it's horses for courses, right? If you're really into your effects pedals and you want to build, huge boards with loads of different options and loads of different soundscapes that you're trying to create, then you might need a bigger board, and that might be your bag, right? But for the type of gigging that we're doing and that I know a lot of our kind of listeners are doing, I would say either build a couple of small boards or build a medium-sized board and then have fun with taking things in and off of that board, because you've got to think about weight, you've got to think about fitting it in the beat of your car when you're driving around to a gig, and you've also got to think about the practicalities of being something that's simple enough for you to fault find and diagnose when something goes wrong. And that kind of worries me with these really complex boards. I don't have the luxury going out with a with a tech that's going to do all of this stuff for me if something goes wrong. So I want it to be not too complicated.
Absolutely, I completely agree. That's what, the thing I love the most about having a board is the fact that I can take it out of its case when I'm at a gig and plonk it down. And I don't have it on it anymore, but when I first built this particular board, I made and put onto it a little 1-in 1-out patch bay. And I kind of stuck that under one side so that I had the power and my guitar in and out all coming off the same side of the pedal board, and everything was permanently wired on the board itself. So you got to a gig and you just plonk this thing down, plug the power in, both guitar leads in and out straight off one side, and it's done and it's set up ready to go. It's convenient. And other thing to consider as well is if you're traveling a lot as a guitarist, maybe try and get something that gives you the option to buy a hard case for your pedal board as well. Most pedal boards now I think come with really good soft cases, but getting something with a hard case I think is important, especially if you've got a lot of expensive pedals. I mean, if you've got an original clone, you should probably leave that at home. That's not take it to the gig, right? Not with how much they cost now. And then also you should get a board that allows you to easily fit power sources to it. You mentioned earlier on about getting a smaller board for something that you put 3 or 4 pedals on. I think those are great, but they are harder to get power supplies onto. Often the power supply has to take the space of a pedal, and then you're kind of like, I can't stomp on my power supply and change this. That way you can stomp it and break it, and that'll change your sound. Getting a board that leaves you room to expand if you need it to, something that's well protected by maybe a hard case, something that allows you to build a power supply into it without affecting how many pedals you can get onto it is good. And maybe even something like the Schmidt Array boards that actually have those patch bays built into them, so that you can just connect everything up on the board and then plug your in and out from the first and last pedals onto a patch bay, and then you can just connect your guitar into the pedal board itself rather than into the first and last pedals. And that's a really good way of doing it. So you've got all your pedals now, you've made a choice about the pedal board. Now you've got your board and your pedals, you need to build the pedal board. And the first thing that you should do is your power. You should work out what you need to power everything. And that there is some maths involved. So when you built your current pedal board, what did you think about in terms of power? Did you really consider the power requirements?
I thought what I need is someone with an engineering and electrical background that I can just speak to, who can make my life easier in this regard. And so I called you. and at that point you said to me, there's some maths involved, and I said, oh right, well, I'm going to go and have a nap. Here's a list of pedals that I want to put on the board. Can you do the maths and tell me? The way that we did it, this was years ago. This is going back years and years ago.
It is, isn't it?
So I obviously knew that I needed to create some real estate for a power supply. Powering all of these pedals with batteries wasn't an option for me to be changing out those batteries every few minutes or every few gigs rather. And some of the pedals that I was choosing, particularly some of the mini pedals, didn't even accommodate a 9-volt battery. Right? They were power supply only. So that needed to be factored in. Now, the more I read about power supplies, everyone was telling me that I needed to get a really invest in a really good isolated power supply, so that each pedal had its own kind of signal to the power supply, kept things cleaner, reduced the noise floor, gave you better performance out of the pedals, all of that. And so I was fully ready to go ahead and spend a few $100 on, is it kind of like the Voodoo power supplies and things that exist?
Yeah.
And then I stumbled across this power supply called the Diego Power Station, which is not an isolating power supply in terms of sending a signal to each and every pedal, or a power supply to each and every pedal. It daisy chains, right? So that's the other way to do it, is you can daisy chain your kind of power together in that way. And I must say, I was prepared for it not to give the results that I needed to. And it's been flawless. It looks looks like a laptop battery charger, and it's really small. It slots right underneath my pedal train, and is securely attached underneath. So I'm not losing any real estate on the top of the board at all. And it tucks really neatly underneath the board, and is secured in place. And then I just bought the additional kind of little daisy chain links that you can buy for as many pedals that you've got. And yeah, and I spoke to you and I said, look, this thing says it's got it's obviously all 9 volts. So you've got to check that all your pedals are running 9 volt, because I know some of them don't take 9 volt. They have 18 volts, some of the pedals.
Yeah, there's various, isn't there? Yeah. Some pedals will take a range. So, for example, you'll probably find that your clone that you have, which you'll speak about later, you're probably feeding it 9 volts. You'll probably find it will take 18, and then you'll end up with even a higher headroom of sound from your pedal, because it's operating on a larger frequency, larger power range. So it's got effectively more gain before it breaks up. So you'll get even bigger, cleaner boost. Most tube screamers, I think, will take up to about 18 volts. They recommend 9. Voltage is an interesting thing to play with, but yeah, you're right.
So I sent you the specs of this power supply thing, and because the literature with it says, it powers up to 30 pedals, and it says that it doesn't have any of the issues with noise or kind of things like that. So I was like, well, it sounds too good to be true. And it was how much it was. It was less than £100, less than $100. It was I think it's I don't know if they make it anymore, but it was really inexpensive. And I said, look, it's got a rating of, I think it's 3,000 milliamps or something. And you were like, yeah, that's enough to kill an elephant. That will do it.
Yeah.
So I took an easy route out, and I must say it hasn't let me down. But maybe I would get better performance out of my pedals and tone if I bought a really expensive power supply with kind of isolating.
Well, you probably wouldn't necessarily get a different performance from your pedals, but what you'd likely notice is, and again, it's probably only going to be subtle because you don't have that kind of complex a rig. But what happens with daisy chaining is any noise that can be introduced onto the power line of a pedal by the pedal itself is then shared around all the pedals. So if there's slight interference created in the power from one pedal, then all those pedals see that interference, and effectively that 9 volt signal that you're giving a pedal is the power by which it's making the sound, and any noise that's on that voltage ends up on the guitar sound itself. So if you've got a particularly noisy pedal, it should really be on an isolated power supply, because then it doesn't affect the sound of other pedals. There's a great video on, obviously, I'm sure everyone who's listening has listened to or watched the pedal show, or that pedal show with me. There's a great episode with Kirk Fletcher. He's a fantastic blues guitarist. Look out one from a few years back where he takes his pedals and he plays his rig, and then they build those pedals onto a new pedal board for him with isolated power supplies. And when he plays that rig after it's been built, he's plugged into it and he turns his guitar volume up, and there's a moment where he turns back to the amp and assumes that his amp's not on because there's no noise.
Right.
And he goes, is it on? And he plays and it's on, and he can't believe how less noisy his guitar rig is, and it's mainly because of the power. It's not just because of, true bypass loop switching from, what is now on his board. And that's from having isolated power. So it stops the distribution of noise from noisy pedals onto other pedals. But it's not always necessary. If you've not got particularly noisy pedals or a complex rig like you haven't, then daisy chaining is going to be absolutely fine. It's going to be a really efficient way of distributing power. I mean, I've pretty much do the same thing. I've got I think it's a 2,500 milliamp 9 volt power supply, which goes into a gig rig distributor. So, which is basically just a daisy chain block that you wire your own kind of connections out. So rather than it being a daisy chain point to point, it's kind of a parallel daisy chain. And effectively, I do the same thing, and that works great for me. But the important thing is, so you probably would have just heard us mention milliamps. That's the power draw of the pedal. That's how much power the pedal needs to do its job. And every pedal will have a defined and specified ampage draw that it requires to work. Digital pedals tend to take quite a lot. So, for example, something like a Strymon Timeline, which is a very complex digital, it's practically a computer, that takes probably 10 to 20 times more power than your average analog pedal. But you should definitely look at all your pedals and just see what it says on the label, on the pedal itself, what its average current draw is, and you should add all of that up. And you should make sure that your power supply that you have has more capability than you require. I would say always try to aim for 50 to 100% more. If you add everything up and you're going to be drawing an amp, try and get a power supply that's capable of 1.5 to 2 amps. Gives you room for expansion, and it means you're not operating at the limit of what the power supply, because that will also start introducing noise. If the power supply is working really hard to transfer all that power through to everything, that's going to start making noises. You're going to start hearing changes happening to your sound as you're running out of power. So that's step number 3. Make sure you get a power supply that's suitable for the pedals that you've chosen, and make sure it provides the voltages as well. So some power supplies have kind of 9 volt, and then they also have 12 volt and 18 volt outputs as well. You might find some of your pedals actually don't have normal 9 volt power supplies, they're 12 or 18. But you can also get kind of connections where you can connect 2 9 volt connections into a cable and it'll join them together, and so that you end up with 18 volts. So there's ways around it, but consider the power requirements of your pedals and what you need to put on your board, and make sure you cover that, with plenty of headroom.
Well, that's really good advice, Matt. And certainly if you've got some noisier pedals, or you just want to really push and refine the performance of your pedal board, then definitely consider one of those isolating power supplies like the Voodoo Lab kit and stuff like that. It sounds like it's worth the additional money and things that they require. But I must say I'm very happy with the daisy chaining that I've done with this Diego power supply. It's been really reliable and not noisy that I noticed. But definitely it's worth something to consider, because I know people get accused about what types of power supply they need. So that was really good advice around calculating the demand that your pedals are going to ask for, and considering whether you want to daisy chain it or have individual feeds to each pedal.
So sorry to interrupt this super interesting conversation. However, if you've made it this far, you should probably subscribe to the Guitar Smarts podcast. You can do that in your favourite podcast app. Go and do that now, and then come back to the show. Let's get back to it.
Brilliant. Okay, so what next now? Now we're going to start sticking some stuff down on our board?
Now we're going to start sticking some stuff down, and we're going to start patching things together, right? So Velcro often comes with your pedal boards, right? I mean, I've got everything Velcroed down. You should make sure that you're happy with the Velcro that comes with your board. I think a lot of people would go out and buy something aftermarket that they prefer. You can get something called pedal tape, I think, which is just an extremely strong Velcro type thing.
Bought that.
Have you got pedal tape on yours?
That's what I bought. Yeah, my pedal train came with some. And again, when you research all of this stuff as you're building a board, I read up, and I didn't even try it. I've kept it there as spares. But a lot of people were advising, particularly if you're taking pedals on and off. And again, I didn't want the hassle of having to deal with this at a gig and pedals coming loose and things. So I researched a couple of different options, and I found that tape that you're talking about. It was wasn't too expensive, but just has that additional kind of resilience than maybe the stock stuff that comes with the pedal board. So for an extra few quid, it was worth the investment. There was something else that came up that people were recommending if you're going to go down the Velcro option, which was a 3M product, which is like their dual lock stuff, and which is incredible stuff. But that is kind of like military grade Velcro.
Yeah, you might as well glue your pedals to your board. I would say, what I've done in the past is a combination of using cable ties or zip ties and just a standard Velcro, because then I know it's secure, but I don't have to go through, I don't have to lever the pedals off the board, a crowbar if I want to. But yeah, choosing something that is going to make sure your pedals stay on the board in transit and when they're on the floor is obviously super important.
Definitely. Don't use masking tape. Don't use gaffer tape. It's nasty, horrible stuff. I've seen people do that. Yeah. I've seen people like put gaffer tape and things on their pedal board, and you go, oh man, you go to a gig and someone spills a pint, which they invariably do, and it goes near your board, and it's a mess waiting to happen, isn't it? Right? And
I've done that. Sorry.
Oh, it was you. Maybe it was you.
Not on the board. I've got to say, I've never done it where I've never put something on a board with masking with gaffer tape, but I have put pedals on the floor at a gig and then used a little bit of gaffer tape just to stop it moving around. So if I stomp on it, I haven't covered it in gaffer tape so that it's it would never come off the floor. But I've taken maybe a couple of inches of gaffer tape, and then on the face of the pedal that's facing me, I've put it on and then on the floor, just so that when I kick on it, it's not going to move away from me, and I don't want to chase the pedal around the floor kind of thing. And that's from when because I have even in recent years done some gigs before where I've just taken like a drive pedal with me, just for the simplicity of, being able to rock up and then disappear off really quickly after a gig, if there's a long drive or whatever. Because who really
in case
cares?
Your amorous fans are chasing after you again. Yeah,
because one thing that's important to mention is that as much of a labour of love as a pedal board can be, as we're talking about all these different things, nobody cares. So what's the point? But anyway, let's carry on.
Okay.
So let's talk about patching cables. So patch cables for your pedals. The first thing to say is the power that we've just been talking about. Don't skimp on getting your power right for your board. The second thing to not skimp on is the patching cables to go between your pedals, because if you get cheap ones from eBay or something like that, these pre-molded, multicolored things, some of those you might not notice any sound difference, but the reliability of them is you really have to call to question. Some of them will break very easily if you change pedals quite frequently, and you don't want to be at a gig where all of a sudden you've got no sound and it's a patch cable and you don't know which one it is. You buy quality items, then those are going to last. And I know that there are products off the shelf that allow you to make your own using kind of solderless connections and things.
Cleartone do a bunch of that.
Exactly, yeah. And actually, I use Cleartone, which are made by a guy in Basingstoke who makes session amplifiers. If you remember session amps that were kind of a big solid-state amp firm through the 80s and still make stuff now. He does a lot of custom cables, which you can order online, and he'll make them by hand. And the main cables I use from my guitar to my board I've had for 10 years that I bought from him, and they've never ever once gone wrong. And they're a little bit more expensive than stuff off the shelf, but they last a long time. And companies like Cleartone and other people will also make things by order. So if you need so many patch cables and you know how long you need them to be and what kind of connections you need, you can get them made and they will last until for eternity. So get a good quality patch cable, get a good quality, whether it's something you make yourself or a product that you buy off the shelf or to make sure you're getting good quality stuff, because it will last.
I think you're right. And it does affect tone. Honestly, it really does. You've got to consider the amount of cabling that runs that you're putting in between these pedals. All has an effect on the impedance and capacitance and essentially the tone of your rig, right? So keep the runs as short as you can. Use the highest quality cable that you can within reason. Even they do those little kind of like jumper plugs, which I've seen as well, which even kind of minimize the amount of cable that you're using, and you can butt pedals up quite close to each other. It makes it a little bit of a faff to pull them in and out. But I use some of those in certain places on the board just to minimize the amount of cabling that I've got going on, because all of that is potentially tone sapping. So I think it's really important to spend a good amount on patch cables. Don't buy the cheapest stuff that really will affect tone, and try and keep them as short as possible.
Yeah. One tip, if you do buy one of those fixed patch cable things that doesn't have cable, that's just like a fixed solid point-to-point patch.
It's like two plugs, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Those are great. They save a lot of space if your pedals kind of line up. But if you do buy those, obviously just be careful if you need to remove a pedal, that you lift both pedals that are connected together by a solid thing. Because if you might not notice, you might bend it when you're trying to lift the pedal up and disconnect it. And then when you plug your new pedal in, you could end up with a weakened solder joint or something inside it. And you might find over time that ends up with some amount of failure. So those are great ways of saving space, but just remember you need to be more careful because they can be fragile. So we've got our pedals, we've got them laid out, we've got a board, we've fixed them onto our board, got everything powered up correctly. Oh, one thing to mention about patch cables, if you're running long patch cables from pedal to pedal, don't have them going in parallel with any power cables that you have. Always try and run power and signal at kind of right angles to each other. That means that any interference that happens between the two is kind of out of phase, and you don't end up transferring noise from power lines onto signal lines. So that's an important thing to remember.
That's a really good tip.
So we've got our board, we've put our power in, we've put our pedals on, we've got everything patched up. You've got a finished pedal board, right? So those are our first four things. But the last thing we wanted to talk about was switching. And this is something I've never had, and I'm not sure if you've ever had. Have you ever had anything like a programmable switcher or a true bypass looper?
I haven't. I'm interested in it, but again, my rig is relatively simple enough for me to not want to do it from a convenience perspective of having to play with so many different combinations of pedals and then route it through a switcher to almost pre-program those banks pedals pedals that come on and off at a given time, I can pretty much achieve that without looking like I'm tap dancing all over my pedal board. But there is a tonal element to it, isn't there, around taking pedals out of the signal chain when they're not going to be in play, which has potentially added benefits to kind of the noise floor of the board and the rig, and also the seeing more of the actual true tone of a pedal unencumbered by the other pedals that are kind of connected to it, right?
That's right, yeah. So a true bypass looper is kind of you can think of it as if you've ever looked at anybody's pedal board and you've seen like a strip of switches along the bottom of the board and all the pedals are connecting into it. It's basically it's a bank of pedals that allows you to bring a pedal into your chain and then take it out of your signal chain rather than just turning them on and off. So if you think about a normal pedal board like mine or yours, even when we've got all of our pedals off, our signal's still running through everything. And some pedals still affect the tone even when they're off, especially if they've got a buffer on the output, which effectively, it kind of resets your signal. It repowers your signal to be stronger. A buffered pedal is a good thing to have at the end of your signal chain so that you can get a nice strong signal going to your amp after all those pedals. Buffer's a complex thing to talk about another time maybe. But the good thing about a true bypass looper is that when you've got all your pedals off, you are going literally straight to your amp. You're not touching anything. You're not going through a pedal even if it's off. And that's important for guitarists who want to minimize the tonal effect that pedals have on their signal even when they're off, so that they get as clean a signal as possible to their amp. And when you when you press on your true bypass looper for a particular pedal, it's just bringing that pedal in to your signal chain. It's effectively just diverting your signal through the pedal. So you'd have all your pedals permanently on and use your true bypass looper to bring them in and out. That's a really good way of controlling noise in your signal chain and being able to also find faults. If one of those patch cables fails, you can just take that pedal out of the loop and you get around the fault. You can also get programmable looping systems like Gig Rigs G3. Boss now do a great series of. Boss even do one, I think it's called the ME3 or the ME5, which is, it's actually a multi-effects processor with 3 loops built into it. But there's loads of them that allow you to program presets effectively. So even a true bypass looper, you have to do everything one at a time. If you've got a drive sound that is your clean boost, a distortion pedal, and a delay pedal, you still have to click 3 switches. Whereas a programmable looper, you could have one button that is a preset of all those loops on and off. So if you have a complex kind of palette of sounds for your band or for your gig, a programmable loop is a really good thing to have on your board because it allows you quick, easy one-button access to combinations of pedals. And it's a really kind of, I've been tempted to kind of go that way in the past just because I like the idea of it. But I also kind of think, well, I'm going down a road there of, having something for the sake of it. But you might find that's something that's really, that's really kind of useful. Now, another great use for a programmable looper. Have you heard of the 4-cable method?
I have heard of the 4-cable method, yeah, but it involves the effects loop, doesn't it? And it sounded like too much hassle for me, and I like to keep it. Simple. But tell us a little bit more about what the virtues and benefits of that 4-cable method are.
So it allows you to effectively present your preamp stage of your amplifier as a pedal that you can turn on and off. So you can go through all your pedals through. Let's say you've got a programmable looper, and you've got a couple of distortions, some modulation, and then let's say you've got 2 loops remaining at the end of your chain. You can go out of that second to last loop, and instead of going into a pedal, you can go into your amplifier's front end, into your input, and the return of that loop can come from the send of your effects loop. So what you've done now is you're sending your guitar out of your programmable looper into your amp, and you're bringing the output of its preamp back into your looper. So now you can select or deselect your amplifier's inherent sound before it hits the power amp. And then in your last loop, you could have a guitar preamp, a pedal-based guitar preamp that maybe you have a Fender amp like you have, but you want to have a proper Marshall sound available to you. So you could get something like like a Strymon Iridium, which is a preamp pedal that you can get all kinds of different sounds. You could have that as your last loop, and you can program your programmable looper to kind of always flip-flop between the two, so you don't have both on. You can always have one or the other. Now what you've done is you've effectively given yourself the choice of two different guitar amps. You can now either select from your looper your Fender preamp to go into your power amp, or you can select your Marshall or other based preamp that you've got on your board to go into your power. And that's a really good way of not having to have two amps for two different types of sounds. You can use, your amp isn't this siloed sound up behind you that you put everything into. You can actually bring the inherent sound of your amp to the board and choose it or not choose it. So that's a really good thing. So for switching, you should consider, whether you think true bypass looping is important to the sound, whether you want to program presets so that you're not dancing around as much. And also, if you want to end up with a super capable rig using the 4-cable method of being able to bring your preamp down to the board in that way. And there we are, really. That's kind of the 5 things that I think people should consider when they're building a rig, when they're building their board.
That's really great advice, Matt. That's and look, honestly, some of the stuff that you taught me about that with building my pedal board, once I put it into practice and played around with it's meant that I'm not going back to multi-effects units now. I'm really enjoying having a pedal board, and I just really have got so much satisfaction out of building it as well, and experimenting with it and putting some of that theory that you talk about into pedal boards with your kind of knowledge of how to do this. I've definitely learned a whole heap about it. So thank you for taking us through that. That's great. And look, if any of our listeners have got kind of more questions or want to hear a little bit more in depth around some of the topics that we've discussed today, there's so much more we could go into, right, around true bypass and buffers and where to put them on a pedal board and all that kind of stuff. Then we'd be delighted to answer some of those questions. Just contact us on our Instagram or Facebook site at Guitar Smarts and ask away. And but hopefully what we've covered today for people that are either putting together their first pedal board or thinking about getting more out of their existing pedal board, some of those bits that we've covered today will help people kind of maximize the tone from a pedal board, which should be a lot of fun, right, to play with.
Absolutely. It's a journey. It's an ongoing thing, isn't it, that we're always doing, and in 15, 20 years for me of gigging, it's constantly evolving. You're always changing it. You always think you've got there, and then you hear somebody else or another pedal or something, and you go,
yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that you can just have a bit of fun with as well. As you say, it's not spending hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars or pounds, buying a new guitar. It's having a play and trying out what it can do to your sound by spending a little bit of money on a new pedal. And some of the cheaper pedals that we've covered in other podcasts are just delivering some incredible tone for the money. And so the pedal that I was referring to earlier, that I'm just loving at the moment, is the Centaur clone that is available from the slightly infamous website wish.com. So there's been some YouTube videos of this. There's a great video on the YouTube channel Music is Win around this pedal, and where he actually did compare this, shall we say, copy of the Centaur pedal to a real one, and I think he was amazed at how close it was. And I must say, I bought the pedal on a whim for £50 delivered. It promptly arrived. Took a couple of weeks. It is one of the best pedals I've ever played in my life. It's absolutely phenomenal. The always on kind of clean, crunchy tones from it are impeccable. The full on gain sound from it is impeccable. It is just a monstrous pedal for 50 quid. So look, depends how you feel about knockoff gear and copy stuff. I know there's people that get quite irate and quite excited about all of that kind of stuff where it's just basically ripped off something else. But I'm not a multi-millionaire.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not going to go and spend $3,000 on one pedal. But if I can get pretty close to it, then or even if it just sounds good, even if it doesn't sound exactly like the original. Honestly, this clone from wish.com, absolutely blindingly good.
Yeah, amazing.
I think it's that pedal that's missing. I think it's that pedal that's missing on your board.
I think it might be,
which is going to give you that sound you're after. Before we go, can we just do one quick listener question, which is completely related to what we're talking about today, actually. Excellent. Which is, I was chatting to a guitarist the other day who, again, was thinking of building a smaller board, and he was saying, just one of the annoying things as well, because he's got a slightly bigger board, and he said that he just doesn't find that the Velcro holds, and it's kind of, it peels off, and his pedals don't stick on properly to the actual board. And is there anything that you can do to, what should he be using on his board instead of the Velcro, which he finds really unreliable? So you've mentioned cable ties and things like that, which I think is really good advice. One of the things that I advised him to do, which I found has meant that I haven't had an issue with any of the Velcroing on my pedal board, before I even started to put the pedals onto the board itself with Velcro, just as I was prepping the board, I gave it a really good clean with a degreasing agent, like a kind of Windex or glass cleaner on that metal surface, and like a microfiber cloth, and just thoroughly cleaned it so there was no grease, no dust, no lint, no nothing, before I then laid down the Velcro onto the board itself. And then I put a load of books and just to weigh down the adhesive on that board, and I left it for a couple of hours like that to let that adhesive set on the pedal board. And then what I found by doing that is that the Velcro just stayed. It hasn't budged, it hasn't moved, and I can rip pedals on and off that board and the Velcro just holds. And I think what a lot of people do is they neglect to kind of prepare the surface of that pedal board before they start attaching Velcro to it, and the adhesive doesn't have time to go off properly, and then they're forever trying to stick it back down with gaffer tape. And
actually, I guess if you're having that problem, it might be a bit of a pain to kind of start again from scratch, but it's probably well worth it just to take off any, if your Velcro's failing, just take it off, give it a good clean, like you said, reapply it really properly on a clean surface, and weigh it down so you get the best adhesion as possible on that Velcro. And that's great advice. Fantastic.
Cool.
Good stuff. Well, that was a good one. It was a long
one, wasn't it? Starts off as a one-parter, turns into 7 parts.
Maybe not. It'll be 2. Excellent. Well, brilliant. What are you gonna? Anything planned for the week, guitar-wise? Anything you're practicing?
Yes, definitely, mate. So I haven't had a lot of chance to play guitar this last week, but with the couple of days where the kids are going to the grandparents, I'm so looking forward to doing some playing for a couple or 3 hours, and I'm going deeper into my journey of learning some music theory. And I spent some time with the Dorian mode over the last couple of weeks, and trying to get my ear attuned to that, and having fun with that, and getting some more major scale kind of shapes across the neck. I'm by no means proficient at this stuff yet, but it's all little light bulb moments that are going on. So I'm still thoroughly enjoying pushing myself with that. And then you sent me, oh man, why did you do this to me? This is just lost like hours now of my life. But you sent me a video last night going, some really good playing and some really good licks in this, of a guy that I haven't previously come across, called Tom Quayle. Wow is all I can say. Yeah, that man can play.
Absolutely.
So I've got many lost hours ahead of me watching some of his videos and trying to replicate and steal some of his licks, and he's got some great online stuff there as well around approaches to the fretboard, which I'm going to try and model my way through some of those lessons.
Awesome. Very much the same for me. I'm just planning on spending a bit of time working on some technique and some fingerboard knowledge. That's one of the things I'm really kind of trying to beat into my own head. Is kind of, I keep learning to play things almost mechanically without the understanding of why certain things are being played. If I'm learning a guitar solo by somebody or a song, so I'm really trying to force myself when I'm playing and practicing to understand why certain note choices there, and then to try and understand, and navigate the fretboard in a more conscious way than I do. So more of that this week for me.
I don't know, that cover of that Steely Dan solo that you put on Instagram. Man, that was tasty. If you haven't seen Matt Oliver playing that, go and check that out. Yeah, man, honestly, you did an incredible job with that. I thought that was
thanks, man.
It looked very much conscious what you were doing in terms.
Well, that's the thing. I actually meant that was an exercise in this. So I said to myself, I'm never going to learn a guitar solo again without first learning the chord sequence that it's over, right? Which is, you know, some of us do that. Some of us will go, I love that guitar solo. You just sit down and you'll learn the tab to it and you'll play it. But can you honestly say you know every chord that's being played under it? And I'm trying to make a habit of that now because I want to understand why certain things sound good over certain chords. So I'm trying to do more of that.
Yeah, what a great discipline to do. Excellent. Well, look, good luck with that, mate. And then we will catch up on the other side of the Easter holiday, full of chocolate and having had a good amount of guitar practice.
Exactly. Looking forward to it, mate. Have a cracking Easter, and I'll speak to you next week.
Yeah, and you guys take care. Cheers, mate.
All the best, mate. Ta-da. Well, that was another super fun conversation. I really hope you enjoyed it. Remember to come over to our social media pages, tell us what you think, ask us some questions, come and say hello, anything at all, share some information with us, give us ideas for podcasts that you'd like to hear and subjects that you'd like to hear us talk about in the future. And brilliant. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.